So we just got finished with our library build. What do you want to do next, Dad?
I've been thinking about a really good challenge, and what I mean by that is, let's see who can make the best project using only 2x4s, and it has to be around $100.
That sounds like a lot of fun. Both of us sharing a workshop, keeping our projects secret, and at the end, we'll share them with the viewers. And what do you say we donate one of our projects at the end?
That's a great idea, I love it. So I gotta share with you a little secret. When I challenged Mandy to the 2x4 challenge, I already had a project in mind. Now I had seen somebody do a table out of 2x4s on the internet, and although that's just too big a project, I think I'm gonna scale it down and I'm gonna make a coffee table out of 2x4s. It'll fit the parameters of basically under $100, and the time frame will fit as well. Now 2x4 coffee table really doesn't sound exciting, but I think what you're going to find about this coffee table is the design. Now that's usually not my forte. When Mandy and I work on projects together, she usually is the design person. She's more creative. I'm more of the functionality person about how it's going to go together, and that's why we make a good team. And now I'm on my own, so I kind of had to steal from the internet to get the design. But nonetheless, I think this will be a great challenge, and I'm eager to share it with you.
My dad wanted a challenge. He's got himself a challenge, because little does he know, I have been thinking up this project for about a year now. My daughter loves artwork. She loves to draw. So this is the perfect opportunity for me to take these 2x4s and build a really durable workbench for her. And the greatest part is, at the end of the day, not only am I going to win and beat my dad, but I'm gonna get to present my daughter with a great gift that she's gonna love for years to come. So I think I got this in the bag.
I started with the legs and set a stop on the miter saw to cut them all to length. This coffee table is a basic design that anyone can build in a few hours. Once everything was cut to length, I assembled the legs by stacking the 2x4s and ensured everything was square. Glue and brad nails were my friends here. Now that one set of legs is complete, I can duplicate the process for the other side. Once they were glued and dried, I sent them through my joiner to square and smooth out the surface. 2x4s are terrible, and in trying to get a good finish, I don't recommend building furniture using 2x4s. However, if money is an issue, it's the cheaper way to go. That said, it doesn't matter if you're using 2x4s or maple. Your labor is the same, and that's really the true cost. Sharing the shop was a challenge in itself, because we not only were trying to hide our projects from one another, but we had to allocate equal time.
I took off to Home Depot to find the straightest 2x4s I could, a challenge in itself. Then I took the time to appreciate the music. Sometimes it's nice to stop and have yourself a little dance party. Now let's get back to work. I started out with my material cut list for the top and legs. I cut everything to length on my miter saw and placed the items neatly on my workbench. I needed to remove the radius of the 2x4s for the top, so I marked my lines, as you can see, and ripped them on my table saw. Then I took all of my 2x4s outside to plane them and give them a smooth finish.
I wanted to make sure my table had some pizzazz. This is a competition after all. To connect the legs, I created a unique beam by stacking 2x4s in a rectangle, leaving the center section open. In all fairness, I had seen this design on a large table and wanted to try to replicate it for my build. Like I did with the legs, I glued the pieces together and clamped them until the glue set. While waiting for this to dry, I shifted my focus to the top of the table. The process was very similar to the legs. I cut 7 2x4s to length and ripped them on the table saw to remove the radius. I then glued them together and added my clamps. The legs and beam have not dried, and while waiting for the top to dry, I could focus all my attention on sanding and sanding and sanding. Sometimes it feels like this process never ends, but it's important if you want a nice finish. I then proceeded to sand the top once the glue dried, making sure I sanded the bottom of the table as well to give it a professional look.
Now I'm ready to glue the top together. I placed all my boards on pipe clamps so I could glue everything and clamp to dry. This isn't the final width of my table because I needed to send it through the planer, which is only 12 inches wide. So I glued what I could for now and took it back outside to smooth it out. Now what makes this table so interesting is the legs are mortised into the table. This not only is a great design feature, but its real purpose is strength. I started measuring and laying out where my legs would go and cut the remaining 2x4s to length. Then I went back to gluing the pieces I just cut to the top. As you can see, there are now mortises ready for me to place my legs. But I've clamped everything together to let it dry. While the top was drying, I built my legs, which consisted of 3 2x4s per leg. The middle piece is a bit longer, as that will be the tenon and inserted into the mortise. I made my sets of legs and then started the tedious process of sanding everything down. There was a lot of glue squeeze out that needed to be sanded off. In hindsight, I should have wiped it down while it was wet. To help, I took my chisel to get the larger pieces off and even moved on to using my belt sander. Just when you think sanding is complete, it's really not. I went back to sanding the top now that the glue had dried.
Now it's time I applied my pre-stained wood conditioner. I highly recommend not skipping this as it gives your product an even finish and avoids any blotchiness. I also decided to stain the legs a darker color than the top that would accentuate the design. I went with dark walnut for the legs to make it pop. Now with the top, I first stained it weathered oak and let it dry. Then I added a coat of classic gray to give it a more rustic finish. I can't say enough how much this brings out the grain in the wood, even on a 2x4, which is what I was going for. Prior to assembling the base to the legs, I applied 4 coats of satin urethane. Don't forget to do the underside of your table. Now comes the fun part. I'm ready to put it all together. I fastened the beam to the legs and then the legs to the top. Then I decided to add leg levelers, which I purchased off Amazon. Installation is pretty straightforward. Each leg required drilling 2 separate holes. The first hole is to insert the foot, and the second hole is the fastener the leg screws into. It certainly sounds more complicated than it is. It's hard to believe that this coffee table is made from less than 20 2x4s, which brings the overall price of this piece to about $60. I think it came out great and would be an eye-popping piece in anyone's home, but I'm even more curious to see what Mandy comes up with.
After I was done sanding everything, I grabbed my legs, cut them to length, and measured where I needed to dado my cross brace for my table. I then proceeded to cut this on the miter saw. I didn't have a dado blade, so I set my miter saw to the correct depth and made many passes to clear out the material. It's now time to assemble the legs. This was a pretty tight fit, and I only needed glue and a rubber mallet to secure the legs. And when I say this was a tight fit, I mean it was a tight fit. I thought it would be easier to bring the table to the floor to finish the assembly. I clamped cross braces to the legs to ensure they remained perpendicular to the tabletop until the glue dried. I was eager to see the height of the table and how it aligned with various seating, so I grabbed a couple chairs to test it out. Once the legs were in place and dry, I removed the excess tenon using my multi-tool and belt sander to once again smooth out the top. Then I took my T-square and trued up the tabletop. The last part of assembling this table was taking out the temporary braces I had in place and installing the finished cross braces. I measured and cut them to length on the miter saw and then pre-drilled pilot holes. I then glued and clamped them in place and then added the stringer. Now I envisioned my daughter spending countless hours drawing on this table. She has an easel she's outgrown, so I grabbed the dowel from it and decided to add a place to put a roll of paper across the table. A few minutes at the bandsaw and drill press and I have my paper holder. Now I know this is a 2x4 challenge and I'm cheating a little bit here, but I wanted this table to have a finished look, so I added some 1x4 pine trim to the perimeter of the table. After testing some stain, I decided to use wood conditioner and keep the top of my table natural by just using urethane to seal it. I wanted a two-tone look and my legs to pop, so I went with golden oak and again sealed the legs with a water-based urethane. I'm not a gambler, but if I were, I'd be all in on me winning this challenge with this table right here. Now I know I veered from the requirements a little bit. I've got trim on here, I've got a little dowel for this paper, but at the end of the day, if I don't win the challenge, that's okay, because my daughter loves this table more than anything, and that to me is a win in itself. So I set it up like this, give her some crayons, and more often than not, this is what she's writing on this table. I think this says it all.
Well, Mandy, I think yours is better than mine purely due to the function of your piece. Your daughter's going to enjoy this for many, many years.
It's funny that you say that. I actually like yours more. It has a nice rustic feel to it. But it sounds like we need feedback from our audience. please let us know in the comments below which table you like best. Now, we don't have a use for the coffee table, so we'll be donating it to someone in need in our area. If any of you are in the Western Massachusetts area and would like this coffee table, please say so in the comments below and we'll put your name into a drawing.